going on, guys, and welcome back to another video. So, we've got quite the pile of junk in front of us today. Now this was a big lot of broken laptops that they were chucking out at my company, and I decided to snag them because there's, a lot of useful parts in there, which I've stripped out most of the useful stuff already. However, we've got some stuff to experiment with here, and just kind of go through a few of the things that we retrieved. So, yeah. So a couple of these laptops were ones that met a rather unfortunate fate, and something that I hadn't really known was that big of an issue. I haven't seen that much before up until now, but they actually caught fire. So, yeah, both of them have burnt componentry around their like the power input and power delivery side of their boards, which is just strange. I mean, it makes sense. It's a high power or high current area on the main board, and I guess if you have like stress fractures on components and stuff, it can cause things to fail and go closed circuit, and then, fire and smoke ensues. But yeah, I hadn't really run into that before. However, one of them I can kind of understand because it has serious bend damage to the actual laptop. So it looks like something heavy was set on it, probably caused flexion damage to the PCB, and then when it was powered up next, it went poof. So, but anyway, we got a reasonable pile of parts here. Some are more interesting than others, and from that, I'm hoping we can build at least one working computer. So, yeah, this guy down here is the insides of one of these laptops. This works. The main board is good. That's the only working main board out of the whole lot. It's out of an Asus convertible. I can dig it out of the pile there in a moment here, but the main board powers up. The display, the touch panel, everything else on the laptop is totally destroyed. This was a technician laptop that was used out in the field for repairing scales, and this the kind of laptop that should not be used in that kind of environment. It did not hold up. It got things dropped on it. It was just mangled. It's really bad. So, although the screen's not technically broken, like per se, like physically, it doesn't display video to the screen anymore. So what we're dealing with here is we have video on HDMI out. This is running a Core i5. I'm not certain of what generation. And we have 8 gigs of DDR3. There's 4 gigs on board on the main board, and we have an additional 4 gigabyte module in here. So rather interesting little PCB. What I would like to do out of this is turn it into a little standalone desktop. You'll notice the heatsink that I've got on here, that is not stock. That is just a random heatsink out of a box that I chucked on there. And I just slathered some thermal compound on top of the heat pipe and stuck that there for now. It's not permanently attached. It can come back off. The idea behind that being I wanted to increase the thermal mass of the cooler so it would take longer, or under most circumstances when it's idle, the fan wouldn't kick on, but unfortunately that doesn't seem to be the case. The fan seems to just kind of run all the time anyway. So I may be looking into revisiting an idea that I had way back in like 2015, I think, back when I started this channel. I had an old piece of crap broken laptop way back then that I wanted to turn into a passively cooled desktop, which, with laptop components, that's fairly doable. Now, I kind of want to do the same thing with this. However, I think to accomplish that, I'm going to need a very large extruded piece of aluminum, something that's like most of the size of this board and probably fairly thick. So if I could make this kind of a rectangular prism type shape, so something that's about yay thick, large mass attached to it, I could remove the fan. I would have to have some sort of anchor points on it, so I could bolt through from the other side of the board. There is a little back plate on here, however it is removable. So if I take that off, I could screw from the back side of the board into threaded holes on a block of aluminum, and that would be a fairly reasonable cooling solution for it. At least I think it would be. A nice part about this particular design is this board over here is all of our front I/O. We have a USB port, card reader, volume up, volume down, Windows key, and the power switch all on this little board. And this is on a little flexible cable, so if I want to locate it on the front of the system, if it was standing vertically, I could do that. If I wanted to put it on the top, I could do that. You can put this anywhere, and this little board here is their status lights, which can also be placed wherever you see fit. So there's a lot of flexibility to the design with this. Orienting it that way would limit all the ports to be on the bottom of the system, but I'm thinking kind of a layout similar to how the G4 Cube, if you're familiar with that old Mac, how it had all the ports on the bottom and then a little feet that raised it up, and you could then run your cables out underneath it. I think something like that would look quite cool. So yeah, I'd like to pursue something along that nature. I'm thinking I could 3D print a case for this quite easily. It would just be down to finding a heatsink that's capable of cooling that. Now I have this guy here, which is, I believe, for an old Pentium 4. It's got quite large gaps between the fins, which is something that you actually want when you're trying to do passively cooled systems. When you have a lot of fine fins together, that inhibits convection currents from operating efficiently. When you have fairly large gaps and fairly large amounts of thermal mass to the cooler, that works a little bit better. At least that's my understanding of it. Unfortunately, I can't really mount this cooler to it because it's too large and impacts the other passive components on the board and would potentially short things out. So we're not going to be putting that on there today. However, I would like to get this to boot up and actually run Windows from here. Now, one problem is this is how you attach a SATA drive to it. This little board mounts right here. So that clips into a little socket, and the drive would normally go right there. Let me just scooch that on up so you can see it a little bit better. So the drive would normally sit right here in the laptop. I don't want that. So this is going to go away. We have a 24 gig Kingston SSD in here that was like an accelerator SSD. However, we only have a tiny little bit of room here, and most of the larger capacity MSATA modules that could fit in here, well, that would normally be able to be installed, would be too long to fit. That being said, if we remove the fan and we go passive and we ride it above that, that won't be an issue. I would just have to create a mounting post somewhere on the other side so I could fasten the SSD down. And I actually have, out of one of the other machines, this is not MSATA, this is M.2, but it is a SATA drive. So I've looked around and I found that they make direct adapters that go from MSATA to SATA M.2. They appear to just be, since they're both operating at SATA protocols, it appears to be a direct, just pin-to-pin adapter for one of these. So I could put this 256 gig SSD right there, essentially. Now, that being said, there's no fan, so it won't impact airflow or anything like that. Shouldn't be a problem. Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments, but that's my thinking anyway. But for testing purposes, we will go ahead and use this guy. I'm torn on whether I want Wi-Fi enabled on here. It does have an Ethernet port, however, it was one of those hinged ports, so it's not really something you could plug Ethernet into. I could run a USB to Ethernet adapter on there, but I could always put the boost SSD here or a secondary SSD in the Wi-Fi slot, but most likely I will just keep the Wi-Fi slot active and run this thing on wireless. I think it's just wireless N, but that should be good enough for a machine of this caliber. The ultimate goal behind this is to create a small, mostly silent, if not completely silent, PC that is passively cooled. It would be a cool project, and I kind of want to see what you guys, what you think of this. and if you have any other ideas for me. So yeah, let's get this thing booted up, see if everything seems to be working okay, and try to load an OS on it. And then if that all works out, I will hand it over to you guys in the comments, see what you suggest, and then I will proceed from there. Okay, so we have the system up and running, and we have the Windows 10 installer going here. I will spare you the full extent of the installation, and we'll speed this up just a tad so we can get this over with. And there we go. We have a fully functioning Windows 10 PC. It's running a bit on the sluggish side now because I haven't connected internet up to it yet, so it's missing a lot of its drivers and whatnot, but it is fully functional. Although the fan is spinning on here, it seems to be very quiet, and the air coming out of it is quite cool. The heatsink I have over the actual processor is quite warm, so it seems to actually be doing something. I'm not super opposed to just kind of leaving it with something like this. So yeah, that's not a bad option. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments down there, what we could do with this. But I will mention the drive that I used in here, the SATA, just a 320 gig random SATA hard drive, is incredibly slow. So this is not a great experience how we have it set up right now. I will be replacing that with an SSD eventually. So yeah, anyway, it's a cool little experiment, and she seems to be running quite nicely, aside from the sluggish hard drive. Temperature-wise, everything seems just fine. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll see what we can do with this to progress with this project a little bit further. And until next time, thanks for watching, and y'all stay safe out there.